Great, thank you.
Sure, no problem.
We have less faces on there than I saw previous.
Hey, Owen. Yep, you're in the right one. I'm in a different room just to make it very clear that I'm like going to be muting and unmuting.
What happened to Yaron? Yaron dropped off?
Yeah, he did. Unfortunately, he had a last-minute conflict.
You were warden? Although I saw full-time slash
Yeah,
part-time,
no,
so
I was
like,
executive.
I was like, oh my god, that makes
Yeah, I created my own.
We can see you perfectly, Owen. Thank you. So thanks to everyone who's joined so far. We're going to get started at about 5 after. So just wait a few more minutes for the live stream to get up and running and for more people to join the rooms. In New York, do we have Ari, Amy, and Molly? Yes, great.
Yes, we're all here.
Perfect. Cool. So we'll just give it maybe 2 more minutes and then we'll get started.
Hello, Mr. Corso. How are you doing? Nice to see you. See you. Rock and roll. There we go.
All right. Well, we're at about 5 after, so why don't we go ahead and get started. First off, thank you so much to everyone who's came into the rooms as well as everyone on live stream. We've got a great panel today talking all about business school. My name's Jill. I am a GTech ads specialist, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. But most importantly, we have our panelists. We've got Amy, Molly, Owen, and Ari here to tell us about their experiences with getting their MBA and just in the business school process. So to kick things off, panelists, if you would just introduce yourselves, tell us your name, your current role, what business school you attended, and when you actually graduated or will graduate from that program. So Amy, if you want to kick things off.
Sure. I'm Amy Osakowski Davis, and I'm currently at NYU Stern's part-time program. I'm hoping to graduate in the next year or year and a half. That's the scary thing about part-time programs, is that they're a little bit flexible, so you're not sure when you're going to be done with all of it. And I'm on the GTech for GCAS team. Essentially, we partner with the leaders in the GCAS organization to help develop technical solutions for some of our largest brand advertisers.
Hi, everybody. My name is Molly Williams. I graduated from Wharton in 2013. I did the executive program, so I explained it as sort of a full-time, part-time hybrid program, but as we get into the panel, I can talk more about what executive means. And I am leading the dedicated team for integrated solutions under Duda. I've been at Google for 10 years, and yeah, looking forward to talking more about my experience.
Owen?
I'm Owen Corso, and I'm a creative specialist on the GTech Ads America team. And I'm currently enrolled in the Berkeley Evening Weekend part-time program. So I was in the weekday cohort where I would go after work 2 days a week. And then it's a 3-year program. You can load up and do summer courses and finish in 2.5 years, or you can take a little longer, but it's typically 3 years. And then I'll finish in the spring of 2017, so I'm currently in the second half of my second year.
And I'm Ariana Nobles. I'm currently the manager for the DCM platform specialist. So our team makes sure the trunk of all the platforms runs properly. So I'm under Monica. I actually came into Google in sales ops, and that's where I was for a couple years supporting LCS, and then I've been in this GTech role for a few months now. I went to Wharton. I am class of 13, and I interned for Google during my MBA summer internship. It was a 2-year program and absolutely wonderful. Completed full-time. I think I'm the only full-time MBA student here, or former student here.
Awesome, thanks for the intros. So let's go ahead and just dive in. First question is, why did you decide to pursue an MBA, and kind of what factors led to that decision? So Amy, if we just want to jump back to you and go down the line.
Sure. I don't know that I'm the best person to answer this question, because I think I was very on the fence about doing an MBA. I love school, and I felt like an MBA would be useful in case I wanted to move back home where my parents are in the Midwest, and that it would help establish me in the right sort of roles there. I don't know from a Google perspective, my husband is always like, what's the return on this? Are you going to get a new job? Will you get a promotion? And I'm like, I don't think so. So to be totally candid, I don't know how it fits in with Google precisely, but I think from a personal fulfillment perspective, being in school and then also being exposed to classmates who have other experiences that are complementary to mine and where I'm learning from them is how it helps me here specifically.
For me, I had a background in liberal arts. Undergrad, I was a creative writing English major. I wanted to be a novelist and go into publishing possibly. And after college, I got into sales. I worked in an investment bank, and then I ended up at Google. And at Google, I was doing a lot of management and operations, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm completely away from my background and what I thought I wanted to do. And I also, as I was getting more and more scope at Google, started to work with more and more people who had their MBA. And I personally was like, what am I missing in my knowledge, in my skill set, my toolbox, et cetera, that all these other people have that I'm working with? So for me, it was a lot about confidence. I didn't want to feel like I was one peg below like what others had. Also for my future, I didn't know like what my next steps would necessarily be, and I wanted to have this degree not only for the confidence, but for the experience and the knowledge that could bring me forward in my career at Google or even beyond Google. It felt like to me an investment that wouldn't be detrimental in any way, even though it's definitely a huge sacrifice financially, personally, short term for your time. So those were sort of the factors that led me to pursue the MBA, but I was also very happy at Google, so I wasn't looking for a big change, which is why I did the executive program. I know we'll get more to that in the next question. Over to Owen.
So for me, much like Molly, didn't have a business background. I was a computer science undergrad at an arts and sciences school. So the MBA was going to kind of fill in those gaps, those gaping holes in business, business skill set, tool set, and it kind of brings me deeper to the intersection of business and technology. Working at a great place like Google, this just kind of complements, and the part-time program was a way to kind of learn some stuff, come back to work, apply it, go back, back and forth, and it was just something that was, I've always felt compelled to kind of like do more, like where I was working at an agency in a creative production shop was like still didn't feel like I fit, so I just kind of wanted to up the ante, so to speak, and literally financially, but so it's just kind of like a journey and just trying to you don't need to know exactly where you want to go except when you write the essay, but you're going to go into a good place. It's going to, lift you, broaden your horizons, deepen your understanding in certain areas, and it's all, going to be beneficial with what you choose to do.
Huh. I'll go. I think there were two major categories of reasons for me. One, I'll just be candid and there's a prestige factor, or my parents went to grad school. I just was supposed to go to grad school. I did this program when I was an undergrad. The work seemed interesting. The people seemed interesting. So it was like, yeah, let's get an Ivy League on the record. So there's a part of that. A bigger part about why I really wanted to go to business school, and I definitely had to lie about this when it came to the admissions essay, is I was very much looking for a personal growth experience. I was very shy in college. I was shy in my first 5 years of working, and I just wanted to have a chance to just be in that collegial environment. I never was interested in going into the heavy high income, like we're earning great here, but wasn't planning on investment banking or really intense area where you definitely get a great yield for your money. And so there was a moment when I was applying where I was like, shoot, this is going to be a cash negative experience. A cash negative experience for me, and that sucks. I'm going to spend $200,000 for this, but I still really wanted to go just for me personally. It happened to work out financially for me, but yeah, I was looking for a personal growth experience, and I really felt like I got it.
Wow, thank you all for your transparency and for being so candid. I know I really appreciate that, and I'm sure that that's kind of why everyone wanted to come to this panel, is to actually hear the real story about grad school and the real process. So, take a step back. How did you go about determining which business school you were going to apply to, or which schools you might apply to, and then ultimately where you would go, and kind of like what factors, maybe part-time, full-time, location, prestige, led to that decision?
For me, I had taken the GMAT a long time ago, and it was expiring, and I also knew I wanted to get started on school as soon as I could. I didn't want to leave Google because I felt like I'd want to come back to an organization like Google. Everyone there wants to have coffee chats with me and like learn all about Google, so I didn't want to leave that environment, and NYU really is the program that suits part-time schedules the best in New York. Plus, it has, if you're interested in marketing, that's a big focus of theirs, and it's so close to work that it was a really natural fit. So from there, it was a matter of applying and submitting all of those things. But it was a pretty straightforward choice, just given where I was at and the decisions that I knew I would or would not make.
For me, I had just moved to New York right before I applied, so I looked primarily at NYU and Columbia at first. I was actually really focused on Columbia. And then I looked at Kellogg, and then I talked to a friend of mine from undergrad who had just finished Wharton's executive MBA program, and he's like, why aren't you looking at Wharton? Like, this is the #1 program, especially for executive. You're kind of like dumb not to look at it. So I'm like, okay, let me take a look, and I was like, I'm not going to like Wharton. Like, I was liberal arts, and it's super quant heavy, and I just was completely blown away when I went down and I sat in on classes, and I'm like, yeah, this is, like, the name, unlike other business schools, like, I think the name really does, like you were saying, Ariana, like, make a difference. So that was something that I had to consider. And unlike Amy, I did not have a GMAT under my belt yet, so I was also past the deadline for Wharton. So I studied for the GMAT, took the GMAT, bombed the GMAT, took the GMAT again, applied, interviewed, and got in. So I ended up not even applying to any of the other schools. But one of the things I want to say about the executive program is my age was sort of like past the prime for full-time by the time I got around to business school, and I didn't want to leave Google, so I was really weighing part-time and executive. And what I really liked about executive is it's a set schedule, so it's 2 years. You start and you graduate with the exact same class, because I'm very social. I wanted the social aspect. I wanted the real network. That's a huge plus of going to business school. I actually met my husband the first weekend of class, so I got like a great return on my investment. But that's aside from the point. But Wharton, it was like you're living on campus. Like, part of your tuition includes your room and board. You're at a hotel. Everyone, whether they're local or coming from like New York or DC or wherever, they stay on campus. You're there every other Friday, Saturday for 2 full years. A lot of executive programs are 18 months, but Wharton, the curriculum is exactly the same as full-time, except it's 2 full years, no summer off, but you have all the same access to the best professors. There's no auction system for the classes that you take. They literally cater to an executive audience. You don't have to do a thing except do a whole lot of studying and put a lot of time into the program. So for me, like, it was kind of a nice marriage of the social network of a part-time plus like keeping my ass on a schedule. Like, I knew if I was doing part-time, I would find excuses and like life gets in the way of extending it. And I wanted to know 2 years I'm out. So that was the executive program for me.
So on my end, before Google was thinking about going full-time, so I took the GMAT first, did very well, and then was able to kind of apply to the top tier schools. I wasn't considering any of the lesser tier schools, because when you think about the money and you need that signal to kind of make it more valuable. So then I ended up applying over the course of 2.5 years to like 8 schools, a couple times, got on the wait list, got interviews, didn't get in anywhere, and then I finally got into Cornell the week that I got the offer at Google. It was like the same week, got into the Cornell Tech program, and Google, I'm like, when it rains, it pours. And then, ended up saying no to that, but then moved out here. And then it's when you want something that badly, it's really hard to kind of like just forget about it. So that spring I was like, the part-time program is going to be perfect. Now I'm working at SF. I can just go across the bay, and it's just being in this proximity to Silicon Valley, that just kind of made sense. Stanford doesn't have a part-time program, so that was the best school like co-located to where I am. So it just made a lot of sense on my end to do that.
Cool. Let's see, how did I pick Wharton? So it kind of goes back into my reasons for going to business school. I did have like that prestige factor that I was looking for. I never questioned full-time or part-time for me personally because it was so much about a life experience that I wanted to like be fully immersed in it. So that was kind of always where I was landing. When it was about picking between the individual schools, I didn't have like a very specific view, like I wasn't gunning towards startups and tech, so it wasn't Stanford, and it wasn't like for sure I want to do marketing, so it wasn't Kellogg. I was pretty open-ended about what I was looking to do, and so when I visited the schools, the impression when I met the students and alums at Wharton was it was so much about they would talk to me about the clubs that they were involved in, or they went to Antarctica, or they did Quantico, and they like went through like some sort of like fire chief. I don't remember anyways, all these like incredible experiences that were so much more than being in a classroom or getting a particular job, and that was just so connected to what I was looking for that's instantly what I wanted, and I think not at all what I would have had a preconceived notion of. I would have thought of all the schools Wharton would have been like, get in and get your money when you're out, but that I actually got the totally different impression when I got there, and that's why I picked it.
Great, thanks, and thank you, Molly, for explaining a little bit more about the executive side of things. I actually did not know that, so thank you.
Sure.
So this has come up a couple of times already, but kind of the one big part of getting an MBA is the fact that it's a large investment. So out of curiosity, do you have any recommendations or advice or maybe personal anecdotes on that financial aspect, kind of how to finance it, how to go about thinking about it? You've all mentioned kind of that return on investment a couple of times, but would love to hear your thoughts on the finance part of getting an MBA.
In general, the types of like financial aid that's available to an undergraduate student is available at a graduate level, so there are plenty of people who finance it with loans. Also, some programs have merit-based scholarships, so not that that necessarily pays all of your bills, but it helps a little bit. I don't have a ton else to say about financing. I feel like I'm further into my career, so I had some money saved up, thankfully. But those are two ways that I know a lot of people help pay for it. Plus, Google gives a bit of reimbursement, so that's also useful as well.
Yeah, I think my best advice is if the financial piece is a big concern, is keep working and look at like a part-time or executive program, because for me, I got promoted while I was at business school, like that. I didn't have to take myself out of the career game to get my degree, and it was like not an issue in continuing to perform at work. I mean, it's a lot harder, like you have to be really good at time management and things like that, but for me, like my salary kept growing, my stock kept vesting, like all those things are really important when you're thinking about a big expense like business school. Of course, the financial aid and scholarships are all available. For me, like the kind of annoying expense was buying the train tickets to Philly every other weekend, but you can get a student discount card, and it was kind of a social experience too. A quarter of our class was from New York, so we'd all meet at Penn Station in the morning. On the way down Friday mornings, we'd be studying together in the train, and then Saturday afternoons on the way back to the city, everyone's in the bar car drinking and playing games. So like it becomes kind of part of the experience, and when you get your paycheck every other week, that helps too. And then you can also expense over however many calendar years your program is. So though Wharton was 2 years. It was over 3 calendar years. So at the time when I went, it was, I think, $12,000 a year. You could get reimbursed through Google. So I did that over 3 years. So that helped a little bit too.
Yeah, so it's Google gives right now 12 grand still, but like 5,500 of that is not taxed. So it ends up being like 7-8 grand per calendar year. And so for me, it's across 4 calendar years. And then I got a Wells Fargo private MBA loan, and as well as Google compensation. Just not going out and buying any big toys. Big, just intangible big toys for your brain.
So a few things. One is there are full tuition fellowships. Certainly nothing you can bank on, but they do come in. They are unexpected, and you just write the essays, or even not, and the schools may give you like a free ride. So can't forget about that. 2 would be a full-time program cost is like no joke. Like aside from the $100K you'll be spending on tuition, there's I have never spent money faster in my life before or after business school than the 2 years I was there. Like it's not just like the trip to Kilimanjaro, but it's like every dinner, every drinks. You're surrounded by people that are kind of used to having a high income, and it's funny when you're not earning an income, you have no ruler against what you can spend, so you just end up spending and spending. So the point is that I would, unless you're managing your expenses closely, you could easily be doing in addition to the opportunity cost, $100K for your tuition, $100K for other things, and coming out with a pretty big loan. That first loan payment due in December catches people by quite a jolt. But everyone's paying them through, and you work through it. You're earning a proper salary, so it works. It's just a really big cost full time.
Great.
Yeah, banks are more than happy to give MBAs loans because they're probably going to pay it back.
It's true. Cool. So I've got a couple more questions, and then maybe after the next 2, I will open it up to ask the rooms questions. So if you are in the rooms, be thinking about what you want to ask, or if you're on live stream, you can also ping me if you know my LDAP, and I'm happy to ask the question as well. But so for my next question, so obviously it sounds like everyone is so far at least happy with their MBA experience, but I'm interested in just what did you learn while getting your MBA that you might not have learned on the job? Kind of what have been those biggest benefits that you've really seen from either so far along in your progress or since actually getting the credential?
For me, the biggest learnings that I wouldn't have learned on the job have been as a result of being with the colleagues that I've been with. There's one girl in particular who I was really excited to meet, sold remnant inventory for OkCupid, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to hear all about what you do. And I could ask her stupid questions that I think a lot of times I wouldn't ever want to ask a client for fear of admitting that I didn't know something. So you learn a lot from the people who are in class with you. I'm sure every single one of our experiences has had a diversity of other students in terms of what their backgrounds are and their interests. So I really appreciate that piece of it. Additionally, I never studied marketing when I was in undergrad. I did do some business coursework, but I thought marketing was stupid and fluffy. And now I have a very different perspective where I'm super excited to be in classes where we're focused specifically on brand strategy, which has been really useful for me in now working with big brands and thinking about the concerns that they have. That's the other thing that I don't think I ever would have taken out of just work straight up. And then there's also the opportunity, if you're geeky like I am, to explore personal interests and learn other things that you're just not going to get fulfilled with at work because that's not where your focus lies.
Yeah, so for me in the coursework, Wharton has a very strong core curriculum that I think is called the core, that you have to do your first year. And there were some classes in that I never would have taken. I was pretty bad at some of them, in particular these operations classes called OPM, which was like linear programming and things that were just completely out of my comfort zone. But I felt like, wow, this is something I never would have learned at Google, because I would never feel confident enough to dip my toe anywhere near this. But outside of the courses, we did, Ariana's mentioned a reference to this. There's I went abroad 3 different times for classes, twice to Rwanda, and I got incredibly involved with a girls' school there that I'm still involved with today. And so that experience for me in itself was life-changing. Learning about the country, going through the genocide and how they've rebuilt their country from the ground up, and meeting survivors, and now working with this girls' school there. It's life-changing experience I never would have had without business school. And then on the personal side, Amy is talking about what your classmates do are incredibly interesting. A bunch have started companies, startups, and I also recently got pulled into an angel investing network for women starting companies. Also, I never would have gotten exposed to that. So just things in my personal life too that I find very fulfilling, that also provide great opportunities that I just never would have had the exposure to without business school.
So the biggest thing I learned that I might not have learned at work, that's really hard to point out because they kind of all just mesh together. But when Molly was mentioning something, I thought about macroeconomics. You always think, you want the government to lower the unemployment rate. And we don't want unemployment. Unemployment's bad. But really, you can't go to zero, knowing that there's an optimum amount of unemployment that's not zero. And that's where the economy can be stuff like that, where you're oh, that's contrary to what I thought before, but I never would have known that without taking macroeconomics. But so it's all little things like that, organizational dynamics. We all have meetings, we all work with different stakeholders, but then just kind of having a deeper intuition behind how to align stakeholders, how to quickly figure out what their goals are, so you can kind of create win-wins all over the place. So just being more conscious of doing that, not just kind of doing what you want to do, and not taking into account this kind of broader business landscape of all your teams and clients and that kind of thing. And then the biggest benefits to the MBA, I guess more generally, is we've talked a lot about it, but to explicitly state it, is the network, all your colleagues that are now going to be your friends for life.
Or your spouse. Yeah. Or father of your children. Same thing.
Definitely. And then, the knowledge of all the classes and everything that you learn, all the tools and models and new ways to think. And then lastly, the credential, just kind of having that signal that I'm an MBA now, and that's kind of that confidence and that, just kind of bedrock of signaling.
So what did I get out of Wharton? I would be remiss if I didn't say this job, which I applied to Google 6 years ago, never heard back, and now I have a job here. So that definitely was the big thing. Two, I know everyone mentioned it, but gosh, the network, the friends that I travel with all the time and I see them on weekends. I remember one of our friends was not happy with her consulting job, and we were all just sitting there with wine. It's okay, do you want to work in healthcare? Do you want to work in tech? Do you want to work in investment banking? We just went around the room which job do you want? And so that kind of safety net of really close friends who would vouch for you and get you jobs at wonderful places is something that I haven't had to take advantage of yet, and I'm grateful is there. The last thing I think about is a lot of times they would quote for us that within the next 5 years after graduating, a lot of students say that what was most valuable were these specific hard skills like modeling and financials and marketing dollars. But when they talk to people who are 20 years out, the things that they would always focus on were the soft skills. And I agree a lot. Like, the things that I learned most while I was there was that more time and effort doesn't mean greater impact, and how do I optimize time spent to get better impact. The leadership venture that I went on, where we had to be like a captain of a ship for a day at a time. We were on the boat for like 10 days. And the feedback that I got that, one of my mates didn't think I was being fair when I was allocating these things, and like the importance of like fairness and leadership, like things that are now like obvious, but like are now like very close to like my brain and my heart now. Those are the things that stick out to me most as like just wonderful things that I learned. Maybe I would have learned them on the job, but who knows? I learned them there.
Great, thanks. And thank you, Owen, for that micro lesson in macroeconomics. I feel like I learned something. So I'm actually going to jump in. I've started getting a couple pings from folks on the live stream. So we're going to go to a couple live questions, and then I'll ask the room some questions, and then I have a million other questions I can ask depending on time. So the first question here is from Ottavio, and maybe I'll ask this one right to Molly, but anyone else feel free to jump in. How many work experience years do you suggest for someone to have before starting an MBA?
So for the executive program, the average is about 10 years. Wharton, when I did look at schools, Wharton was on the lower side for that. NYU was higher. Columbia was a little bit higher too. So I was trying to get sort of to be the median age range in the program. Anything less than that for Wharton in particular was a fellowship. So you had to have like specific sign off from your company. For full-time, I would say the sweet spot is probably like four to five years.
Wharton's older than like Harvard and some other ones, and we're about 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years of experience when you're going in.
When you start.
Yeah.
And one thing to consider with the full-time versus part-time or executive is the types of positions that are being recruited for out of the full-time program are like at a specific job.
Like for Google, it's around an L5.
Yeah.
Most of our MBAs, I mean, just for transparency, come in around an L5. I've seen L4, some L6, but on average L5.
Right. Or like I think of with consulting or investment banking, like a lot of times people go into an associate program. So in making my decision about full-time versus part-time, part of the reason for knowing I needed to do part-time was that I felt like in some instances I was going to be more senior than like the types of roles that would be most actively recruiting on campus. I don't know if you feel...
I think that makes sense. We're a younger crowd, or we were. So that makes sense. I mean, they'll adjust, but they're definitely optimized for people that have been working for about 4 or 5 years and stuff.
Cool. Owen, anything to add on the West Coast front?
Well, I had like about 10 years experience when I started the part-time program. I was a little bit of a late bloomer in that respect, but I've been about the average age for the class, maybe slightly older. I didn't consider the executive MBA at all because I didn't consider myself to be an executive yet. But yeah.
There is the Wharton programs in San Francisco too, literally like right next to the Google office.
Under the office, actually. It's in the same building, basically.
Yeah, I did a class, so from the East Coast, you can actually swap. You can do a class, or you can go for a term abroad or on the other side of the country. So we had people like come to Philly from the West Coast. I don't think anybody went backwards, but I did do one class there. That was not offered on the East Coast, so that was a cool benefit.
Great. Cool. So next question from one of our folks on the live stream. It's from Neil. He says, it seems like a majority of you didn't have business backgrounds, which played a part in your reasoning to pursue your MBA. Did a lot of your classmates study business in undergrad, and do you feel like they had the same positive experience as you? So kind of just not coming from a business background, how did pursuing an MBA work out? Or if you did have a business background, maybe was that repetitive, or was it just enriching?
I can start. I think there's an echo too. I don't know where it's coming from. Sorry. Yeah, that helps. It's hard to hear yourself think. So for me, with not a business background, almost everything I learned was brand new, which is kind of embarrassing, but it was super helpful. And with the leadership stuff, I felt like I was ahead of the curve coming from Google, because a lot of the case studies were like, Google does this, Google does that. So everyone sort of looked to me in the discussion. So being like so behind the 8 ball for like macro, micro, all these operational finance classes, I felt like, okay, here's where I'm like kind of good. So there were actually people in my class who did Wharton undergrad as well as for MBA. And I think it's just really, it's learning at a different level. You know, you have this really diverse group of students. You know, there are people in my class who are doctors, you know, startups, finance, or like every industry you can think of. And so when you have all those range of experiences and learnings, and then plus coupled with the theory and all the case studies and the problem sets you're doing, it's just, I think, a completely different experience that takes the education to the next level.
I think it really depends upon what you're trying to get out of it if you already have a business background. Some things will be repetitive, but let's face it, you probably thought about school in a different way then as you do now, probably with more maturity, I would guess. And I have a lot of friends who went back to business school after doing business school undergraduate, and for them it was partially about the accreditation, partially about, and mostly about building a network. So I still think there are benefits depending upon what you're hoping to get out of a program.
Yeah, to build on that, you know, you have to make a choice. Do I want to go deeper into one subject area, or do I want to broaden, have more breadth of education? You know, being in the Silicon Valley area, the makeup of the class at Haas is very tech heavy, a lot of engineers, and not as much of a presence of the true finance, investment banker types. They're there, but they're just not as, you know, saturated. But yeah, I was kind of like looking like I didn't, you know, I could have gotten a master's in computer science, and I have an undergrad in computer science, and kind of went real deep into that area. But my personal preference was to kind of do this kind of complementary, balanced approach. But part of me does want to get, you know, does want that, you know, maybe in a couple of years after I pay down this, but really not in the short term. But there's, you know, if you're interested in that kind of complementary skill set, you want to get it. At Google, you have a tremendous amount of resources to learn at your own pace, to kind of put yourself through your own curriculum. Like, you know, I'm also at work trying to transfer to the O ladder, so I'm studying all those computer science fundamentals. I'm doing all that kind of you know, engineering type stuff. So it's kind of bringing me deeper to the intersection of technology and business. And it's, you know, we have, being at Google, we're so lucky we have access to all these resources. It's up to you to make, you know, take use of it and chart your own course.
Cool. So I'll ask one more I've got tons of questions flowing in from our live stream, but then I'll go to the rooms. So next question is from Jimmy. He's curious if anyone considered a different graduate degree or maybe a joint degree, like a JD MBA, MPA, or anything like that.
Did not.
No.
Yeah, I kind of just, I just mentioned having that computer science, or the master's in computer science MBA, but they don't really have that. I think Cornell has that. You can kind of create it, but they don't. That's not very popular, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to pay more money for another one, and from my perspective, the ones that I would have wanted to do something that's either more technical or like design school oriented, but I haven't found any that really pair them together. So it's really like, are you going to practice law and need a business degree, and do you want to pay for that? If so, maybe it makes sense, but I don't know. Other than that, it feels like a lot of money and time away from work.
The only extra plug I would make, this is specific to Wharton, they have a program called Lauder that is an international track that a lot of people find tremendously fulfilling. If you're interested in like an international bent, they have like a whole additional curriculum that can really add a lot of value if that's what you're looking for.
Interesting, cool. So now, does anyone in the rooms have a question they'd like to ask our panel?
I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
You can go first.
Okay. This might be more of a question for Anna since you've completed your program. And nice to see you again, by the way.
Hi,
Nico in Chicago.
It's good to see you.
How have you, I guess my question is, how did you position your MBA, you know, when you were applying for jobs here internally? I guess, how did it come up and, you know, benefit you, I guess, in terms of the skills you learned? Obviously, I know that, like, having an MBA is prestigious in its own right and says a lot, but I guess I'm more curious, once you've completed it, how to talk about it and position it.
So how is an MBA perceived in Google, basically?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good way to frame the question.
I would say it's a really good flag. So like my previous employer had really good experiences with Wharton grads. Now when we're looking at interns, she told the recruiter, just give me Wharton grads. I've had 2 really good Wharton ones, find me another one. So that's really nice. I'm like, well, you might want to look at other ones too. But that certainly helped. I used to work in sales ops, which tends to be a lot more MBA heavy. I don't know more, but is very MBA heavy. They like a lot of consultants and MBAs. So I'm not entirely sure how it's perceived. I mean, honestly, it got me in the door, and it was like a great signal, and I was part of a great grouping of people. It doesn't really come up beyond that. I mean, okay. I hopefully have gotten other things personally, but it doesn't really come up, to be honest, in my experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of, if you look on Grow internally, a lot of the L6, L7 roles will say MBA preferred. And again, like this goes back to one of the reasons I wanted an MBA in the first place is I didn't want to be similar to another candidate applying for a job and lose out on that opportunity because I lacked the degree. So I don't think it's ever going to hurt you internally. Thanks.
Yeah, man, that feeds into the next, or the, you know, for everybody considering an MBA, like preparing the application, you know, you're going to have to get every school has some version of what are your short-term goals, what are your long-term goals, how do you connect the two, why do you need an MBA, why do you need it now, why do you need it from this school? And everybody asks those versions of those questions, and you get grilled over and over from the essays to the interviews to conversations with alumni. You know, you need to be airtight with your story and where you're going. Like, we're all in a certain place on our journey, and it needs to make sense. Like, if you're going to shell out all that money, you got to be absolutely certain that it fits into what you've already thought about. You've already kind of come up with a solution for, like, how, you know, this MBA fits in, and it's urgent. Like, we need it now because I can't do what I want to do without it. It's got to be that kind of like compelling story that you convince whoever the audience is. You have an elevator pitch, you have a medium-sized version, you have the longer version, and it's just got to be, you got to live and breathe it. It's your story, and that, you know, that's not easy to do. You have to kind of unwrap. If your mind is like an onion, you got to peel back the layers to get to the core, you know, root of what makes you tick, and that's only possible through like thinking deeply, thinking like, you know, going through this process of the unwrapping. And that's like one of the hardest things to do. Like, it took me 8 times. I was 2 for 10 in MBA applications. So I think I like iterated and launched and iterated a couple times and got to the right answer, I guess, because I got in. But yeah, it's not easy. I feel like it's something everybody should do every year. Like, you spend so much time working, but you don't spend as much time like thinking about, where do I want to go? What have I learned this year? Where, you know, how does that change, course correct, and come up with like what's best for me right now and how am I working to get there?
I couldn't agree more than that, just in terms of like the application process. Sorry, you're echoing again, Jill. Is the importance of coming up with like a super clear, very well thought through story of why you're applying to grad school, regardless if you think it's absolutely true, is just absolutely critical. Because what your school wants is to know that you're going to go there and you're going to come out and you're going to earn a bunch of money and you're going to look good and you'll look great on their stats. So you got to have like that very clean story. And the other thing is there's like a tendency to want to be like, oh, I'll just make something up and I'll make it sound good and then I'll figure it out in B school. Well, like you're still gonna have to like figure it out in B school. A lot of people have that like existential crisis of, oh my gosh, why am I here and what do I really want to be doing? So it doesn't hurt to start really pushing hard and figuring that out early. It's very difficult though.
Well, and especially if you do a full-time program, people start recruiting immediately once you're there for internships. So there's a need to have a sense of where you want to go anyways when you first show up.
You get 1 quarter off at Wharton, but yeah, it starts pretty quickly.
Cool. I think there was another live question at the beginning there.
Yeah, so I had a question. It was mostly directed towards Owen. So I'm Kelly. I'm a web solutions engineer within GTech Ads. And I'm actually going through exactly the same decision that you mentioned that you've been thinking of, and that's whether to get an MBA or a master's in computer science or potentially both. And for a while, I have thought that both would be a good idea just because I really love the technical part. Like the part I love about my job is programming. That's mostly like, when it comes to working, the thing that I like to do is programming, and I don't really like to do the other stuff, to be frank. But the reason that I wanted to get an MBA is because I think, like, as an individually contributing engineer, my reach can only be so far, and I think I have skills that could make my reach wider if I had the business skills to back them. But then the more that I am actually working, the more that I'm actually not attracted to the business side and way more attracted to the engineering side. So my question is, why did you pursue the MBA? Do you think there are skills that you got in the MBA that you could not have gotten in work? Why is it still in the back of your mind to get a CS master's degree? And I guess tangentially related to that, the background to that is that I do have a master's degree, and I was kind of unsatisfied with it because I felt like the academic rigor was not high enough. And I got the network and I got the prestige and I got all that, but what I didn't get was domain expertise, and that's what I'm really craving. So what went into your business school decision, and why potentially a CS master's in the future?
Well, so, it's about stretching yourself out of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling like you want to do technical, you're at Google, you can certainly do G-Learn courses, get that kind of, like, keep pushing the envelope technically while you're here. There's no better place in the world to do that. To do a dual degree part-time, that's really, like, I've never heard of that. And then
I've had full-time, but yeah.
Well, you could go part-time and get the CS degree, but I feel like at Google you can do the same. That's what I've been kind of doing with the OLED. I have a whole doc with every single resource I can find that teaches about, like, different subject areas, whether it's SQL, algorithms, coding on Google 3, all these, like, systems and stuff, and then they just released TensorFlow for machine intelligence. You can take a G-Learn class on that. So there's plenty of opportunity to your heart's content, deepen your technical expertise to the level that a CS master's would do. Then the MBA is just teaching you how to talk to people that aren't engineers. It's teaching you how to, like, work with teams, like, to be more effective in what you're doing, so you can kind of get back to coding, because you could just keep having meetings till you're blue in the face. But if you don't know how to, like, really kind of get to that, sharp business kind of acumen, like that the way that, bit savvy business people kind of are able to do, that's, like, kind of just a side benefit to the business degree. So I would probably recommend the MBA anyway, because it's just, there's so many ancillary benefits. There's, like I said, the three things: the network, the knowledge, and then the signal. Is if you're, like, a really strong technical engineer that has an MBA, that's a differentiator. That's going to open doors, as in terms of when you get older in leadership positions. And it's just, it's the long game. It's not the short game. You're not going to get any of these returns immediately. You do get some quick wins, but it's really over the long horizon, over the course of your career. And in 20 25 years, that's like really when you start getting the payout of the MBA. So yeah, in summary, at Google, there's more than enough opportunity to get the master's level education, and then the MBA would push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. That would, stretch you to grow in ways that you didn't think possible.
Cool. So then you said that you mentioned that there was engineers within your program. Are they there because they want to get slightly less technical and go on the business side, or do they want to remain technical but want the business background also?
That's going to be a mixed bag, I think. There's a lot of engineers that are coding every day, but I would say that as we grow up, you're not going to want to stay as like much of a worker being in the trenches grinding out tons of code. Then it becomes more mentorship, more managing teams that do that, and you need different skills for that, which an MBA provides. Learning how to make a masterful code, like component that can do all kinds of, it's totally different than teaching someone else to do that. You need to communicate to them. You need to figure out what makes them tick, put yourself in their shoes. That's a totally different skill set in terms of empathy, emotional intelligence, how that fits into the business landscape of the goals, like knowing how what you're doing connects back to the strategy of the organization, and that's all stuff that an MBA does. That just technical doesn't.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. So I'm going to jump in with. We only have about 6 minutes, but we've got lots more questions, so I'll try to get through as many as we can. So for those who are considering applying to business school in the next year or two, what should they be doing now? This is from Linda on Livestream, so maybe in terms of networking, that type of thing to prep for the application process.
Get your GMAT done early because essay writing takes a ton of time, so you just want that GMAT with the score that you want, like done and out of the way. A ton of school research I think is really valuable. You're making a big decision, make sure it's the right school for you and that you're going to be like satisfied with that. And then all that deep introspection about like why and what are you trying to get out of it, where you want to go afterwards. To me, those would be the 3 things I focus on.
Cool. All right, well, I'll just move on to the next question then. So this one is from Nuno, also on Livestream. Do you believe that leaving Google for a full-time MBA and trying to get back to Google after is a bad career move? And is an MBA more related to changing your career path or company? Oh shoot, did I lose you?
Yeah, we dropped off.
Okay.
Are we on a different question now?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll re-ask it. I was just asking, but.
Can I add something to the last answer?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think also recommendations are really important. They're one of the key pieces of the application process. So thinking who you want to write your recommendations for you. I say write in quotes because you write it yourself and get that person to sign off on it for you in 9 out of 10 times. And the other thing I did that I can't recommend enough is hire a consultant to help you with your applications. It was like the best grand I ever spent, or whatever it cost. It wasn't that much. There was like a formula to these essays, and she like got this formula down for me in like 3 phone calls. It was an amazing help, especially when you don't have a lot of time. That was huge.
If there's anyone of color, there's an incredible nonprofit called Management Leadership for Tomorrow that will give you like end-to-end prep MBA program. So you can Google that.
Yeah, in terms of the GMAT prep, I would recommend taking a class. Like my thought behind that was, it's $1,300 you just shell out, but am I going to get a better score if I take the class or if I don't take the class? And then, well, you'll probably get at least 1 point better to take the class, and the goal is to get into the best school, to get the best score possible. So, I did that, and it actually worked out really well. I wasn't, taking all the practice tests. You just drill because it's like this whole other like way to take a test. It's it's a computer adapted test. So you answer a question right, you get a harder question. You answer a question right, you get a harder. The 17th question, if you get them all right, takes too long. And the only way to know that you have to skip that question is by drilling it and knowing like this whole. It's another, like Molly said, a formula like for each of these components to the application. There's a formula. you need to learn.
Great, thank you for coming back to that one. So just to, probably the last question here, which I know none of you actually did this, but I think a lot of people talk about this. The question was, do you believe that leaving Google to pursue your full-time MBA and then trying to come back to Google after is a bad career move, or kind of what are your general thoughts on that? Since I know I've talked about that with many people. What do you think?
Yeah, I had 2 friends who did that. One of them ended up leaving Google the second time, is at Uber now, and another one is still here. And she was actually more senior than I was when she left Google, and now she's more junior than I am. Would she say it was a mistake? Probably not. Like, I think for her, the experience was amazing. She went full-time to, actually both of them went to Michigan. But I think that's something you have to weigh, that you do lose out on some of the time, and you might come back like, and your colleagues have gotten promoted and you have a degree and like you're not. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I got the offer at Cornell and the offer at Google in the same week. So I went to, when I started at Google, I asked my HRBP like that very same question, and his advice was that they look favorably on like, it's not like you're leaving Google, you're quitting Google, it's like bad for, you know, your relationship with Google. When you're leaving to educate yourself, it's not looked at the same as like leaving to go to Facebook or something. It's looked at as like you're trying to better yourself, and that's part of your story, and that's totally fine. But yeah, like Molly said, the opportunity cost of not progressing while you're here for 2 years is significant.
Great. Well, we are at our final minute. So thank you so much to our panelists for being so candid. Really appreciate it. And for everyone who attended, we have been recording this session, so I'll send it out as soon as it's ready. So anyone who wasn't able to attend will be able to hear your insights.
And I think I can probably speak for all of us. Like, I'm more than open to one-on-one chats, coffee, lunch, breakfast, whatever. If you have more like personalized questions, I'm sure all of us are more than happy to talk more. Yeah. I thought we're candid now.
Thanks a lot, Jill. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Do you remember that girl?
Right. They're training. It doesn't work. What they have to do is we have to